Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. I'm Sarah Pope, the Executive Director of Stand for Children Oregon. Today, we're launching a new public tool that for the first time allows families, educators, and policymakers to see how much time students spend in school, district by district across the state. See, a few years ago, Stand for Children worked to align Oregon's literacy instruction with the research. With the passage of the Early Literacy Success Initiative, Oregon made a commitment to teaching our children to read. Then, as Stand worked with educators to implement the work, we started hearing there aren't enough hours in the day or days in the year to implement the new research-based curriculum. That question led us to partner with Echo Northwest to take a new look at how much time Oregon students spend in school and how that compares nationally. And then we built this tool to understand the baseline. Today, we're making that information transparent. And what it shows is not a story of bad actors or rule-breaking districts. It's a story about the low expectations we've set as a state. You're going to see a lot of disparities in time across the state. And that variation exists because Oregon has set a very low floor for time in school and allows broad flexibility in how districts meet it. We're not interested in comparing a single district to one another, but we do want to highlight a system with a serious design problem, one that combines our statewide low expectations with very high degrees of flexibility, a long history of cutting days when budgets get tight, coupled with some of the highest rates of chronic absenteeism in the country. When these things combined, our children are losing out disastrously over time in school. And when you see this data, you'll see just how necessary it is that we take bold statewide action. But the impacts of Oregon's short day don't just show up in the data. They show up in our daily lives. So let's hear directly from educators and families who feel it. The first speaker is Dr. Van Trong.
Good morning. I came to the United States as a refugee from Vietnam, and school has played a very essential role in my life. They were not just places of learning, they were places of stability, belonging, and opportunities. That experience shaped how I understand what equity truly means for our students. I have spent my career in public education, working at every level in the system as a classroom assistant, teacher, principal, and district leader. Across all of these roles, one thing has always been true. Time is one of our greatest assets. From a teacher perspective, the school day often feels rushed. Teachers are constantly making difficult choices between deeper learning and meaningful feedback. And how do we move on? We know in small group instruction, reteaching, and feedback are essential, especially for students who need the most support. But making space for that work is hard when schedules are already full and time is short. As a principal and district leader, I saw the same issue from another angle. Schedules are shaped by real constraints. But when time is limited or inconsistent, the impact is felt most deeply by our students. And it does not land evenly. It lands hardest on children and families who rely most on school for learning, support, and stability. For many of our students, school is far more than a place of instruction. It is where they find meals, trusted relationships, emotional support, and stability. For students who depend on us the most, consistency is their lifeline. As we consider additional instructional hours, we have responsibility to do what is right and protect the support and structure students need to thrive. More time, thoughtfully designed, can strengthen learning, deepen belonging, and create opportunity for those who need it the most. This is a moral compass and the greatest equity equalizer. With that, I will turn it over to families who are living with the reality of Oregon school schedules every day. Allison.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. Thank you to Stand for Children for bringing attention to this issue and for launching a tool that helps make instructional time visible and understandable both for families and decision makers alike. My name is Allison Tierney, and I am representing here today, I guess, as a parent with two full-time parents in our household and two school-aged children. Like so many families, our lives are really built around school schedules. School isn't just where learning happens, it's the foundation of our routines and allows us to be able to work. When instructional days are cut, the impact stretches far beyond the classroom. In our family, we are fortunate. We have jobs with some flexibility. We are privileged enough to pay for child care when school is not in session. But even with those resources, these disruptions are expensive, disruptive, and time consuming. Finding childcare is difficult, often not full day, and requires significant coordination. In April alone, we have 4 no school days, and that's on the back of spring break. We have coverage for 3 of those days at a cost of over $400, and I'm taking a day off to cover that 4th day, and that's with resources. So I think about the families who don't have those options, parents who can't work from home, parents without paid leave, parents who can't afford extra childcare at all. When school is not in session, their choices are very limited, missing work, risking job security, or putting their children in less than ideal situations. At the same time, students, especially those already facing inequities, lose learning time and stability. It's also important to say this clearly. Increasing instructional days or protecting the school calendar should not and cannot fall on the backs of teachers alone. Our teachers are already stretched really thin. They are managing large class sizes, increased student needs, mounting expectations, often without adequate support. Families and educators are not on opposite sides of this issue. We are all feeling the strain of a system that is underfunded and asked to do more with less. Families need consistency. We need reliable schedules we can plan our lives around, and students need stable, sufficient learning time to thrive. Tools like the instructional time tracker matter because they shine a light on what families and educators are feeling and experiencing every day. They help move the conversation from frustration to facts. Protecting instructional days is about student learning, it's about supporting working families, and it's about building a system that really works for the people in it. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective, and I'll pass it over to Carrie Pierce.
Good morning. My name is Carrie Pierce, and I'm the proud parent of 2 children in PPS, one who receives special education services. I am here today because instructional time isn't just an abstract policy issue for families like mine. It shapes whether our children can access their education, build skills, and feel secure in their daily lives. My son relies on routine to feel regulated and successful. When school weeks are interrupted by half days or no school days, especially unexpected ones, it doesn't just shift our schedule, it disrupts his sense of stability. He ruminates on the change, becomes anxious, and talks about it long after it has passed. Some disabled students we know also experience sleep disturbances and behavior struggles on half and no school days. It can be hard for some of those kids to re-engage in the classroom when they get back. For many students with disabilities, those lost hours of instruction also mean losing parts of the school that help them thrive the most. On shortened days, students frequently miss art, music, and PE. These are classes that help them build confidence, connect with peers, and experience success in ways that aren't always possible in a traditional academic setting. There's also the issue of services. My son receives support like speech and occupational therapy, which are critical to his development. When services fall on half or no school days, sometimes kids miss sessions with their service providers. Sometimes those hours are made up, and sometimes they're not. Over time, those missed sessions add up, and the impact is real. That's why increasing instructional time matters so much to families like mine. Governor Kotek has taken an important first step by preserving instructional time, and now that commitment must be matched with real investment. Instructional time is only impactful if it is supported by the professionals and the programs that our students rely on. For our students with disabilities, every hour matters. Our kids deserve full, stable school days, and our schools deserve the resources to make that possible. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it off to Lauren Weiskirk.
Hi, good morning. I'm Lauren Weiskirk. I have a second grader in PPS and a pre-K student also in PPS. And when I moved to Oregon about 7 years ago, one of the first things I heard was no school November. So you've got no school November, you've got summer slide. Basically, we have these clever alliterative phrases that indicate that our kids aren't getting instructional time, as much instructional time as they need. And so, and also, I'm like many parents, I've got a group chat with other moms from across the country, friends I've made like across my life, and I also work nationally. In both of those groups, a frequent joke is, "Hey, Lauren, are your kids in school today?" Because our kids, like they know there's a high chance that the kids aren't. The recent Willamette Week article showed that 18 out of 37 weeks are full weeks in our school year. So there's a reason for those jokes to be made on my text or my Zoom calls, asking whether or not my children are in school. And my kids love school. They love their teachers. They love the other adults. They love interacting with the other children at school. But it's hard to build momentum when the calendar is consistently being interrupted. It really feels like our kids are being asked to graduate as juniors. And if I moved 15 minutes north to Washington, they would have significantly more time with their teachers, let alone if we were to move to a state like Texas or Nebraska or Mississippi, they would have 1.5 to 2 years more instruction by the end of their K-12 experience. So I feel like we're really setting up our kids at a disadvantage when we think about how we have other states that have figured this out and have been able to provide significantly more instructional time. What can we as Oregonians learn from these states? How can we study those systems, get on the phone, figure it out? Because other places have, and our kids are graduating just as their kids are graduating. And we want to make sure that we have equal standing and that our kids are able to really succeed when they leave our systems. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. That's okay. Oh, Dr. Bunchon. We want the speaker list up here. You're fine. Thank you, Lauren. So it's really clear, right? Families feel the disruption, educators feel the pressure. So the question becomes, how much time are Oregon students actually getting and how does it compare? Today, we're launching, as I mentioned, the Oregon Student Contact Time Lookup tool, a public district by district snapshot of how much time students spend in school in Oregon. This is a tool that looks at student contact time measures. It's the hours students are in school bell to bell. This includes things like instruction, lunch, recess, and passing time. This gives us a clear and comparable picture. I want to say this is different than instructional time. Oregon has a definition of instructional time that is different than the bell to bell schedule. This is a district lookup tool based off the bell to bell schedules. This reason it's different is that Oregon's rule allows certain activities like professional development, parent-teacher conferences, time when kids are not in school to count towards instructional time minimums. It also does include, Oregon's definition of instructional time also does not allow you to count things like lunch and recess and passing time. Within the bell-to-bell schedule of what the data we're showing, you will see that as well. So in addition to our low standard, these rules have contributed to really wide variation in how much time kids in school are actually getting. The Echo Northwest findings that we released at the beginning of the year show that Oregon ranks 47th in the nation for time in school. By graduation, the average Oregon student will attend 195 fewer school days than students nationwide. That's more than one academic year. But we even saw greater disparities within Oregon. Students in the lowest time districts may receive up to 3 fewer years of school than students in the highest time districts. And the shocking thing is that there is not much of a pattern when we see high and low time districts in every corner of the state. We see districts on the eastern side of the state, some offering just over 900 hours, which is Oregon's minimum for elementary and middle school. And we see others offering close to $1,200 hours annually. And then even within the Portland metro area, we see differences that amount to more than 100 hours annually. That's more than 3 full weeks of school, meaning kids in one district could be in class for weeks less than their neighbors. And even if your child goes to a school in a district here in Oregon that is above the statewide average, they still tend to fall far short compared to their national peers. So now we're going to turn to some local school board members to hear their perspective. The first is Dr. Von Trong again.
Now, as a school board member, I see this issue from yet another angle. School boards are responsible for balancing budgets, labor agreements, transportation, academic achievements, and operational realities. None of those decisions are simple. But at the end of the day, our responsibility must remain student-focused. Predictable, consistent school time is one of the most equitable support we can provide. It is the foundation for academic learning, services, relationships, and stability. And when time is reduced or inconsistent, students who rely most on school for meal support, routine, and academic support feel it the hardest. When the state set a floor for instructional time that is too low, we create vastly different experiences for children depending on where they live. That kind of variation is not driven by student need. It is driven by policy. Time for students should not be a bargaining tool. A stronger statewide floor would help school boards make decisions that consistently put kids first without forcing districts into impossible trade-offs. This new district lookup tool makes the system visible. And once we can see it clearly, we have the responsibility to fix it so every child in every district in the state get the time they need to succeed. As we consider additional instructional resource hours, we have the responsibility to do what is right and protect the structural students need to thrive. And the state must fully fund schools because this requires system-wide thinking, real partnership, and real support. Ultimately, this is about reducing opportunity gaps for our students and ensuring that every child has equitable access to time, support, and opportunities when they need to thrive. Thank you, and I will pass on to our next board member. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Virginia Lafort, and I'm a member of the PPS School Board. I want to first reiterate what Dr. Trong just stated, that as we work to improve outcomes for Oregon students, we must remain child-centered. When budgets get tight, time is often the first thing that's cut. We've seen it time and time again. But cutting days has real long-term consequences for our students. And once that time is gone, it's very hard to get it back on the schedule. At the same time, we are asking schools to go deeper than ever, especially around literacy. We're investing in evidence-based instruction, in aligned curricula, better support for our students, but those investments cannot succeed if we keep removing the one thing that matters most that will make them successful, and that is time. And here's where accountability matters. Stand for Children's new tool shows the actual hours that the average student spends in school. But when districts report to the state, they don't count passing time or lunch, but they are allowed to count teacher conferences, parent-teacher conferences, and they're allowed to count professional development. And this is time when students are not even in the building. This is where I've got notes. There's a lot of math here. And as a board member, even I have to check it time and time again to understand it. 14 states allow for time not with students to count towards instructional time. Of those 14, the majority cap it at 5 days. Oregon is an outlier. We cap it at 9.2 days, which is 60 hours. There's only one state that has a higher cap, and that is Alaska. They cap it at 10 days. But the difference is that they have a higher floor. They require that students are in the buildings 180 days each year. So what you're seeing today is the best case scenario. In reality, it's often worse. Under Oregon's administrative rules, districts are required to schedule students for the maximum amount of time, 92% of the time. So an individual school can schedule students for 80% of the time and still meet our state requirements. So a school can be at 80% as long as the entire district is at 92%. I know this is a lot of math. What that means is this hits our high school students really hard. I really relate to what you're saying when it feels like we were only going to, our students are juniors. I can tell you right now that 2 out of every 3 PPS high school seniors is not in school full time. That should alarm every single one of us. The state needs to set a real floor. Time should not be one of our bargaining tools. It's not acceptable. It's time to rebuild a full school year for all Oregon students. And then we need to fund it. Thank you for having me. And I'd like to hand it off to Representative Dobson.
Good morning. I am State Representative April Dobson, and I proudly serve Happy Valley and North Clackamas County, as well as the North Clackamas School Board as a director. I think I'm here today to give some context and some clarity from the perspective of the state that we all keep mentioning. The Oregon Constitution promises a uniform general system of common schools. What you've heard today shows that that promise is not being kept. It isn't fair. It isn't fair to kids in districts who are being shortchanged years of school. It isn't fair to parents and families who are trying to schedule their work and life around a consistent and stable schedule. And it's been allowed to happen because our state policy has allowed too few required hours and enormous loopholes. The result is an extreme variation between districts that is not in concert with what our Constitution requires. In 2027, we need to raise the statewide floor. We need to close the loopholes, and we need to protect student learning time, not just when times are good and the state is flush with cash, but also when budgets are tight. The governor's order was an important first step to stop the further erosion of our school year. And I know it felt controversial to some people. We want to fix our schools, and we have to be willing to do hard things. And we have to be willing to face change with conviction and with courage. But I do want to say to our educators who have put their hearts and their souls into their classrooms, into each and every student that has sat in front of them at their desk, that we know that we can't just make this change and expect you to make it work. So we're going to be working hard at the state level to untangle this system that will give us the amount of days that our students need in school to learn and give teachers the support that they need to make that happen. I'm committed to collaborating with districts and educators around how we give students more time to learn, but the outcome is not negotiable. We need to do this, and we need to do it now. It's what Oregonians expect, and it's what our children deserve.
All right, thank you, Representative Dobson. So with that, we are happy to take any questions that anybody has. Yes.
Several of you have mentioned the governor's order, and it sounds like the stats that are available in the new toolkit or the new tracker, thank you, are historical data. So is the governor's order going to have any change? Is it going to make any difference, this year or next year in the numbers that you all are so disappointed with? Are we going to see improvement from the governor's order?
Yeah, so what the governor's order did last week was it prevents school districts from further reducing student contact time that they currently have scheduled as of this academic year, 25-26. And unfortunately, in our state, we already see a handful of districts that have cut student contact time in 25-26. They started a calendar that was longer and they cut student contact days. Those districts, per the governor's order, are now required to add those days back by 27-28. What the governor's order does not do is get us to the national average. It simply, stops the cutting of one of the shortest school years in the country. But that is an important first step because historically here in Oregon, we have massively eroded school time every time we have a budget downturn. In 2003, for those of you who are in Oregon, we were lampooned nationally for cutting in some places up to 24 school days. So step one in our analysis is to not let the problem get worse, which the governor's order does an important first step in preventing. And then step two, to April Dobson's point, the legislator, we need to figure out a statewide solution to this problem. Yeah, Alex.
An example of just a small school year district and a longer school year district.
Yeah, so all of that information is now in the Lookup tool. It's 197 districts. I don't have the names in front of me, but we have some that are offering, 140 days. And with Oregon, you can offer 140 days because our minimum is 900 hours. And most places in elementary school have a 6-hour and 30-minute plus or minus day, which means you can meet the Oregon requirement with 140 days on the calendar. And then we have other places that are offering closer to 170 days. So you'll see all that in the Lookup tool. And there is also an interactive component where you can see really quickly at a snapshot without looking them up, like who's high, who's low. So all that's available online right now.
So in the absence, I don't have to look up individually 190.
No. You can see it in the map. Yes.
These are the board members. I think there seems to be this frustration at the state level that they continue to give increasing amounts of money, especially the last couple of years. And they're looking at districts saying, it's your job to balance this.
Mm-hmm.
And as the fiduciary sort of backstop as a school board member, what do you say to that? Like, at the end of the day, these are decisions made at the district level to shorten or lengthen the school year. Is it misplaced ire from the state to say, we trusted you with this money, what are you doing with it? Is the response that what you've given us is still not enough?
I'm happy to offer context. Do you want someone to go first?
Okay. So budgeting school district has many levels. And I think I can say by starting with state mandates as unfunded. And so therefore there's expectation and there are, for example, I can mention TAG, talent and gifted. The money doesn't come on how do we differentiate and how offer the services to our talented and gifted students. And it's up to us to figure out how to meet the needs of that. And also, special ed services are funded to district, I believe, at 11%, but I can say that most of the district are at 16% using special ed funds. So what do? We take, from general fund to actually meet the kids of our special ed student service who deserve the most support, but it's not funded. So those are the two really big example that comes up to me right now. That is kind of like where I struggle. Also, for example, for our English language learners, the program is not funded to support our brilliant students overall to have the correct services. So therefore, it all comes from general fund. So then something else has to give because we still have to feed the students. We still have to give the student transportation, high bus drivers, and everything is interconnected. So, do you have anything to add, Tricia? Yes.
So I look at this in a way that we need to stop the bleeding two ways. One is this lack of time in our classrooms. I am frustrated as a member of the school board when the calculations to determine the amount of time our students need to be in class are almost impossible. There is no floor. So looking at it through that lens, it's challenging for me to understand how the state even knows what they're funding when there is such a large variation between every district. Clearly, we need more funding. We can't balance the budget without enough money. But if we don't know what we're funding, how do we even start? So for me, it's twofold. They go hand in hand.
I was just going to add one piece of context that I think is important around this discussion, and it's playing out in the media right now. So in 2025, the legislature and the governor approved an increase in something called the current service level. So school administrators, teachers, unions, these aren't the individuals, these are the associations, came together and said, the way you're calculating how much it costs for us to do what we did last year, next year is inaccurate. And the legislature agreed. And the legislature said, okay, we're not doing it accurately, so we are going to do it more accurately. And they made some changes. So an increase of $500 million was allocated to K-12 in 2025. There was concerns in 2026 because of our downward economy that the legislature was going to make cuts to the K-12 allocation. That did not happen in 2026. The legislature did not make cuts to K-12. And yet, we are seeing school districts making cuts. Now, this is an age-old problem in Oregon, but is not one connected to what the legislature allocated in 2025 or 2026. And so when we're reporting on this information and people are giving us choices, it's either this or it's that, I think we need to interrogate those choices because the things that are creating the cuts are far more complicated than simply what the legislature has allocated. So I just wanted to offer that context. And I don't know if Representative Dobson, there was anything from a legislative perspective you wanted to say there. The last part I would offer by way of context is in the 90s, we supposedly equalized school funding. Now, we do have challenges that are appearing with the regressivity of our funding formula that are important for the legislature, we think, to address. But the legislature supposedly equalized funding in the 90s. And we see some districts cutting days and we see other districts not cutting days. So to say that this is the one solution points back to the legislature on this, I think is oversimplifying a really complicated problem because not every district is cutting days, which is sort of evidence in itself that cutting days is not the only option. So I just want to say that by way of context because I think there's a lot of confusion out there. Do you want to offer any other?
Sure. I will just say, first, recognizing my conflict of interest here as both a state legislator and a school board member, that I completely agree with what Sarah just shared with you. That context is very important, and also, I don't want to give the legislature cover. There's difficult choices to be made, and we need to make difficult choices, just like I've asked today for everyone to be willing to make difficult choices. But I think back to the idea of uniformity, the issue that the legislature has in governing, how do we, work this formula to optimize the number of days that students are getting is Oregon's historical and cultural connection to local control. So when the legislature says, okay, we have to calculate these things at the state level, and here's the number, here's the formula, and here's what each district should get, the districts then, take their allocated monies and decide, each individually, all 197 of them, how to spend that. And how they spend that money is not always transparent at the state level. We don't have 197 districts who are willing to open the books and give us daily counts of their attendance. And that's just kind of how it's always been in Oregon. So the levers that we have at the state level to assess when and where someone might be struggling or making a choice that might result in fewer days for their students they're not there. And that's that is an issue that the legislature should try and address and will be part of our package that we're looking at in 27. It's not sustainable to continue the way that we're going. And it's impossible to have accountability when we can't see what's happening in each district and why.
And this might be for you, so if you could stay, and this does go in with your conflict of interest. Do you feel like there's just a disconnect? I mean, Dr. Trong talks about the special education cap. That was a bill that was brought to the legislature and it didn't pass. And so do you feel like, one, there's a disconnect between what's happening in schools and what happens in Salem? And then two, what do you think is it going to take for that, the will to change this system and the way things work here?
I appreciate that you used the word will, because I think that's what it is. I think that there has to be at the state level a willingness to hold the rest of the state accountable when it comes to days, when it comes to how funds are being spent, and hold ourselves accountable when it comes to these funding formulas. It shouldn't have taken the desperate cries of educators and districts around the state for us to recalculate the current service level formulation. It shouldn't have. And so, I think we really need to fight against our own indifference to public education in the state of Oregon. There just have been assumptions for decades since I was a high schooler and Oregon passed Measure 5 that we could do anything that we want around funding for schools, that we can make any changes that we want around how much time kids are in school, and everybody will be fine. And the kids are not all right. They're not doing well. And every parent and educator standing in front of you knows that that's true. So the state is recognizing that from the executive level on down, and we are going to demand the changes that will be necessary to right the ship and make things better for students in Oregon. We do owe it to them.
I have a question for the school regretfully. Looking at teacher contracts, it seems to me that teacher contracts are not written by the teachers union. They are written in agreement with management. They are the fundamental documents that control how much teaching time students get, the length of the teacher workday, the length of the teacher teaching time, the number of days that teachers are going to work. All of that is agreed to by in collective bargaining agreement that's spelled out. We can all look at that. Say something about it. You guys all negotiate with your unions around those and other items. Those bargaining agreements, many of them stretch for years into the future. That makes it incredibly complicated to change this, even if just could you speak to that?
I can offer some context if you want. This is so fun to get to have this discussion with you all who track this so carefully. I would say there is a source of confusion, and then I think it's most important for the school board members to talk, as Betsy's asked. There's a source of confusion about this 30 hours that can count towards parent-teacher conferences and the 30 hours that can count for professional development in our instructional rule. Teachers should have professional development, and they should have parent-teacher conferences. That's really important for teachers to connect with families about how their kids are doing. By no means, and other states that have a different rule have parent-teacher conferences and professional development. What our concern is that when you have one of the lowest requirements in the state, and you then allow another upwards of almost 2 weeks of time when kids aren't in school to count to one of your lowest standards in the country, sorry, not the state, we're further eroding something as foundational as how often our schools open. So I just wanted to say two things are true. Teachers deserve professional development and parent-teacher conferences, which is what you're going to see spelled out as the school board members will speak to in the CBAs. And that time shouldn't count as time when children are in school, especially when our state floor is so low. So I just wanted to set that context. And then Virginia, you wanted to speak to the
everything Sarah said. So to your point, and what my closing comments were saying is that actually let me back up. So I think it's important to be clear that the state of Oregon does not have a minimum number of required days in school. We work with minutes and hours. So when we are bargaining, it becomes a situation where we are part and parceling minutes per day to make our schedules work within these, the not so friendly confines of our budget. If the state sets a floor for the number of days, that makes it a lot easier. It also makes it a lot easier if we just have a set amount of required time. We have been put in a situation where time with students is a negotiating point. That is a non-negotiable, and we need the state to step up and make that job easier for districts.
We'll just add one last piece of context. So Pew has done this research, and around the country, there's the federal government doesn't dictate how many days kids need to receive in school. So what Pew did is they went and examined how do states set policies governing how much time do kids need to spend in school, and they found the closest thing to a national law around it is 180 days. That's, more than half the states set a day requirement. And of those, the majority set 180-day requirement. So when we say that Oregon's low bar with high degrees of flexibility is creating this problem, what other states have done looks really different than what we have in Oregon. Most states set 180-day minimum. So one last piece of context.
I had one more point of clarification with the number of days. If you think about it, we have set up a system that almost incentivizes us to reduce the number of days. The fewer number of days we have, the fewer number of times we need to run buses to and from school. That brings our transportation costs down. The fewer numbers of lunches we need to serve. Less days, less lunch. So we just have created this wild system in the state of Oregon that is constantly incentivizing us to do less for students, while we know that we absolutely have to do more because we are at the bottom in the nation. And I firmly believe that a lot of the administrative rules are playing just as much of a role in these issues as our budgets.
All right, probably have time for one more question. Anything online, Christina? Just wanted to double check. Nope. Okay. Anything last in the room? Yeah, Jim.
What should the floor be, Representative Dobson?
It should be 180 days.
Do you want a mic, just sir? No.
I'll just use my mom voice.
About that plan to alert parents, is that still?
Oh, around attendance. Is it around attendance? Is that what you're speaking? Yeah. So I'm actually so glad you asked that, because when we had Echo Northwest look at this analysis, we asked them two things. What's the impact of Oregon's school year length on our outcomes? And what's the impact of our chronic absenteeism rates on our outcomes? And they found that when you compound Oregon's low school year with our high rates of chronic absenteeism, if we addressed it, we would go from bottom to top in literacy outcomes by 8th grade. And while most of this press conference, because it's connected to the Lookup tool that we're releasing around student contact time, has been around the length of the school year, there's a really important second part of the work that Echo Northwest did, which is around our rates of chronic absenteeism. When Lauren spoke to the fact that kids in Oregon will on average get a year less, it's like they're graduating as juniors instead of seniors, that's due to our short school year. If you're chronically absent in this state, and this is a model, but let's say you remain chronically absent your entire K-12 experience, you will actually get over 2 years less. It compounds the problem again. So we have two really important issues to address if we want to see our kids reading and writing and doing math at the levels that they are all capable of doing. We need to address both the length of our school year and the rates of chronic absenteeism. And there was a bill that Stan championed and worked with Representative Dobson and others on to start the very first step of that conversation, which is releasing the data 4 times a year now, so that we, the public and decision makers and schools and families, can get a better sense of how is our child's district and school doing around being chronically absent, so that we can then start to have statewide strategies to address our third highest rates of chronic absenteeism, which occur in Oregon. All right. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.